of the Global Diplomacy Lab. And Dalia Salinas, who's the head of the consular section of the Embassy of Mexico to the Kingdom of Norway, where, among others, she leads a project on innovation in diplomacy for the Mexican Foreign Ministry. Also, special thanks.
Which part you want to listen? If you want to listen to the
also, special thanks to Dr. Ines Kappert, head of the Gunda Werner Institute for Feminism and Gender Democracy, who will be sharing a powerful keynote address with us. Our hope is that today's session reaffirms your connection to our networks, to this community that is far away and so close, like that Wim Wenders movie. And we look forward to hearing from you and to imagine what we can do together to achieve a more inclusive diplomacy. Make sure to say hi on the chat and tell us who's your superhero, hopefully a super hero. And I leave you with my dear friend, Trini. All yours. Trini, you're on mute. Let me unmute you. Oh.
I'm so sorry. I got carried away. So thank you very much, Caro. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning from here, Santiago, Chile. As Caro said, I have been a diplomat for the Chilean Foreign Service for the past 10 years, and I have the honor of introducing this session before presenting our keynote speaker. So let me share with you 4 quick points. First one, what we mean by diplomacy. When speaking about diplomacy in this session, we are referring to the tool, or some may say art, by which for centuries states have represented themselves in bilateral context or multilateral fora to communicate to each other and negotiate. So you have there 2 basic functions. First, representation, and then communication. Traditionally, diplomacy is carried out by government officials, diplomats, who negotiate agreements that shape the international system and impact the national level. We live in an increasingly global, complex environment, one which is simultaneously becoming more interconnected and at the same time more fragmented. While states remain prominent actors, diffusion of power has paved the way for increasingly influential non-state actors who have gained space in discussing global governance and our common agenda. So this takes me to our second point. The urgency button, COVID-19 and the disruption of the international system. The pandemic has disrupted the international order in every dimension: social patterns, the way we work, we consume, the economics, politics, you name it. In the international arena, it has challenged our multilateral institutions. On a deeper level, this crisis has put to question the values that underpinned our system. In coming out of lockdowns all over the world, we will need to reach a new consensus on how we understand the post-pandemic world and how we will prioritize and where we will put our attention and resources to, what developmental needs we will attend to. We already know that the voices underrepresented or marginalized by our system are those of whom have been more affected by the pandemic. So why inclusive diplomacy is more important now than ever. With such critical decisions to collectively take ahead, diplomacy can play a key role to generate consensus for action, leaving, as the UN 2030 agenda aims, no one behind. As Gender Alliance members, we want to raise the awareness of the need that diplomats put the gender lens on to ask ourselves, when sitting at the negotiating table, are we representing the whole collective we are committed to? Only if we are able to do this, represent our collectives in their entire diversity, state or non-state actors, international agreements will boost their efficacy and diplomacy will reposition itself as the tool to produce global public value. This means we have to rethink how we do diplomacy and how we train to be professionals of diplomacy. But most importantly, we have to dare to imagine new kinds of leadership. And let me end with the fourth positive note. This is already happening at the Global Diplomacy Lab. As many of you know, the Gender Alliance was launched last December in Merida under the leadership of Elsa Marie de Silva and a group of incredible women and men who are members of the networks represented here today. The Global Diplomacy Lab, one of these networks, the GDL, is a platform for exploring a new and more inclusive diplomacy, one that goes beyond state-to-state relations. On its 5th anniversary, celebrated this year, we launched the strategy for the next 5 years of the GDL. We collectively defined that we are working towards a new form of diplomacy, one we've called Diplomacy 4.0, past tracks 1, 2, and 3, which traditional diplomacy already knows, with the aim at enabling all relevant actors to engage in a new form of multi-stakeholder and cross-domain cooperation with an inclusive mindset, one which seeks collective, collaborative solution to shared challenges in a positive sum game. So finally, let me introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Ines Kappert. Dr. Kappert has been the head of the Gunda Werner Institute for Feminism in Heinrich Böll Foundation since 2015. Heinrich Böll Foundation is a think tank affiliated to the German Green Party. It is based in Berlin. Dr. Kappert has focused on feminism for immigration society, intersectional feminism, refugees and women, peace and security. She wrote her PhD on Men in Crisis, or Conservative Criticism of Capitalism in the Cultural Mainstream, in 2008. From 2007 to 2015, she was head of the opinion desk of the German Daily TASS. Welcome, Ines, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for this very lovely introduction. I'm very excited to be here. Welcome to everybody. And since I have 10 minutes, I will just jump into the keynote. Wait. So the title is Time to Care. The pandemic showed that care must be recognized as global value. How is this to be achieved? The pandemic shows us brutally our global economy and coexistence must change. It must change radically. Not so that we can live a little better, but so that we can survive. By we, I mean the majority of people, not just the happy few who can buy their way out of any kind of disasters and of course can make sure that they get the best healthcare possible. So what if we were to place care as a central value at the center of our actions, thoughts, and thus also of our professional life, in short, for leadership? What if we finally recognize that we all need care at every moment? Care would then no longer be understood as help for the weak or something that is reserved for the private sphere, but as a prerequisite for life in general and also for happiness. Basically, every child knows this. But as we grow up, we lose respect for the care of ourselves and even more of others, and instead assume that society and happiness are based on selfishness and strength, including the strength to destroy. The climate catastrophe, the wars, the increasing rearmament, the current COVID pandemic, all that show us how dangerous this thinking is. And now my manuscript disappeared. Sorry, I just have to. I'm finding it, don't worry. Sorry.
While we continue to let people into the session, if you can please say hello on the chat and tell us about a hero of yours, so that we can do a fun report at the end, hopefully. So thank you. Ines.
Okay, so so sorry for the confusion on my side. So the idea is to what we need to do now is to change the standard. So if we introduce care in our professional lives, that means to change the standard. This is a way to go or to come to the new normal. And but what does it mean? Does it mean now that we are all supposed to work in kindergarten, hospitals, or retirement homes? Of course not. Even though more staff and resources are urgently needed there. Care in the sense I mean it means the active care and concern for others and for oneself in all areas. Care means a social life that is not designed to maximize predictable profits and thus also to destroy fellow human beings, animals, and nature, but rather to be caring and embedded in society and nature. It is based on empathy and embeds the own interest in a dynamic of caring and being cared for. Care means also then to deal with the unpredictable in a constructive way. And the pandemic also taught us how important it is to deal with the unpredictable, not in an authoritarian way, but in a constructive, in a caring way. Something which almost 50% of humanity is already taking responsibility, unfortunately without being rewarded or very little rewarded. Women and girls take care to care. Of course, and men do very seldomly. So on a structural level, we have a huge care gap, which is going alongside the gender gap. And by women also, maybe I should add, I mean every person who identifies as woman. So, and furthermore, we have to take care of that. When we're talking about this gender gap and this care gap, that there are also differences amongst women and girls who are forced or who are pushed to take more care, unpaid or underpaid care work than others. Here also we need to see the division lines and not buy into the kitsch, as I call it, to think as women or girls as a homogeneous unity. The power lines are going through that, of course, as well. What the pandemic also showed us that if we don't upgrade care on all levels, we will continue to be in crisis. So I think here, without being at all an expert in international diplomacy, but if global diplomacy means to change the global, not only the international, but the global consensus, then I think global diplomacy can play a big role to shift the consensus to a level where care is at core, where care is at the heart of a professional life and of leadership, and that people and leaders are judged whether they are able to take care of others on a structural level or not. Thus, care should be understood as a value and as a philosophy which opposes the concept of homo economicus, which is the base of capitalism, as you all know, the same as the core idea of European Enlightenment. So it is really about changing the fundamental mindset, namely that man is only fully fledged when he is he or she is autonomous and has recognized violence as his or her essence. The idea of violent autonomy as the highest degree of self-determination makes invisible the fact that none of us will ever be fully autonomous. Fully autonomous is an illusion we were buying into way too long. Let me give you some very banal examples. Even if you're catching a plane, there's an army of signs taking care of you, that you're going the right way, an apparatus, countless people, just that you can take your seat safely without danger. So every action we do, very banal, every day, it needs care. Care is the normal, not the exception, but we treat it as exceptional, as something for the weak. That needs to be changed. So if care is without alternative, why it is appreciated so little, why we don't attribute any worth to it, or almost no worth to it, how can that be? Well, here we come to patriarchy. I mean, I make it now a little bit brief and rough, please allow me that. But the supremacy of the fathers has meant that work is rewarded above of all when it takes place in the public space. The work done at home was either declared as labor of love by wives and daughters or as poorly paid service. Until today, and this cannot be overestimated at all, women and girls do two-thirds of unpaid work worldwide. This has an impact on every level. If we talk about patriarchy, if we talk about justice, we should take that into account. Two-thirds of the unpaid work is done by women and girls. And the study I borrowed my title from, Time to Care, has been published by the beginning of the year, so before the pandemic, by Oxfam. And I just give you the brief summary of this brilliant research. I hardly recommend you to check on it. I quote, "Economic inequality is out of control. In 2019, the world's billionaires, only 2,153 people, had more wealth than 4.6 billion people. The Great Divide is based on a flawed and sexist economic system that values the wealth of the privileged few, mostly men, more than the billions of hours of the most essential work, the unpaid and underpaid work done primarily by women and girls around the world." End of quote. So the pandemic has exacerbated the already massive inequality. In essence, inequality is based on a radical unequal distribution of care work and thus of paid and unpaid work. And the pandemic showed us that the already marginalized people are suffering the most and going to be suffering most from their economical consequences. For example, in the German context, 60% of the women working part-time. That means around 20 hours a week. But part-time jobs are the first one to be terminated in times of crisis. So we are facing a huge backlash when it comes to labor, work, and gender. And now I'm talking about a very rich country, and I'm talking also about a country who did also some good things regarding the pandemic. Nevertheless, the economic consequences on the already existing injustice when it comes to work and when it comes to payment will increase tremendously. The same, of course, applies to migrants. Due to the closed borders, many of them could not do their jobs anymore, could not fulfill their jobs. And if still so, the living condition, the housing conditions, now I'm also referring to German examples, has been terrible, and it made very, 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 very visible that their health doesn't count at all. Germany just put a fence around them after being affected in one of the slaughtery houses you might have heard of. It was internationally used. So they just incarcerated them, basically. So if we want to put care, and now I'm coming to the end, if we want to introduce care in the core of our professional lives, that means to end the keep going. That means that we want a we for all. And now the big question is, of course, how we can use the 4 categories of the 4 R's the Swedish feminist foreign policy introduced as a basic for feminist foreign policy, and I think also for inclusive diplomacies. And that means that means the 4 R's means resources, rights, reality, and representation. And women must have the equal share on on this level in all these fields. So how can we use this knowledge in order to push care forward on a structural level and to deprivatize care? And I think it's now the time to learn this level. It's time to care, because the pandemic, and that might be the positive side of the catastrophe, if you may say so, made it visible to everyone, even to people who are reluctant to see injustice or to address inequality, that a different way of coexistence, also on the international global level, is without alternative. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kappert. It's what a treat and a way to push us into discussions. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So a little bit of housekeeping, but before saying the housekeeping, I forgot to thank the amazing facilitators that will be leading the breakout sessions. So apologies for that. I should have said this at the beginning. So we will have breakout sessions for 35 minutes. The facilitators, so you will be assigned to a breakout room where we hope you engage in co-creation for 35 minutes. We pre-assign facilitators to be more effective and avoid diplomatic encounters. So thank you to the facilitators. So Colette Mazzucchelli, Mohamed Ali, Cecilia Barja, Elsa da Silva, Rocio Cañas, and the 3 of us co-hosts. So you will see the facilitators will be keeping notes. So have fun. Don't forget to introduce yourselves, and yeah, and we'll see you back in 35 minutes. So Tanya, if you can beam us up, please, Scotty. A la Star Trek.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hi. Oh God.
Wow, dream team.
This is an okay group.
Sulin as well. Okay.
Hi, Sulin.
Hey, it's nice to see you.
Yes.
It's a bit complicated because we're sharing offices and now we're all in breakouts. But I try to be a bit silent here.
Okay, so I pasted this document in the chat. Who wants to be the scribe? Okay.
I can do that also.
Yeah. So before that, Dima, I don't think I know you. So would you like to, maybe do a quick round of introductions?
Yeah, hi. I think we never met before. I'm Dima and I'm a Palestinian diplomat living in Ramallah currently.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, you never know who you're going to bump into. So thank you and welcome to this session.
Thank you. Thank you.
So do we do a quick count? So I'm Elsa Marie De Silva. I'm based out of India, and I run a nonprofit called Red Dot Foundation, which works specifically on gender-based violence prevention. Chi?
Sure. I'm Chi. I'm based in Toronto, and I'm currently doing some work with the Ryerson University on future of work.
Hi, Chi. How are you?
Nice to see you, Dima.
Nice to see you.
Absolutely.
How is the family?
Oh, they're great. Thank you for asking. I'm going to tag Blair next.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Blair. I'm normally based in Pakistan, but I'm in the US at the moment, and I run an organization called the Accountability Lab. And we work with people all over the world to make governments more accountable and transparent.
Sulan?
Sorry, yeah. Sulan, over to you.
Yes, I'm Sulen. I'm based in Berlin. I'm part of the Global Diplomacy Lab Secretariat, and I'm thrilled to see that almost all of you, apart from Armin, but he's also part of the team, are GDL members, because Dima is also, she's been participating in the third lab, if I'm not wrong, right? So happy that you connect and meet each other here. Up to Armin, I think, right?
Just a quick hello as well. I was the ISC Berlin, so a colleague of Sulen, and we're working to look into what makes networks impactful and how to activate networks and thrive them throughout the world. So really exciting to see this network initiative coming into reality here, and I'm very passionate about gender issues. So that's why I'm here personally. And also just a quick question, housekeeping. So the link you shared, and I'm just going to share my screen. I do type everything in here. Is that correct?
So Armin, it's the last table with my name on it, group number 8. Yeah.
It's this one, yeah?
Scroll down to group number 8. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Okay, I didn't see it goes further down. Yeah. Wonderful.
I think everybody adjusted it, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to discuss how can we promote care as an organizational value? Are there any project ideas proposed that could benefit from collaboration between Gender Alliance members? What do they need? What are the resources, funding, who would like to be involved? And you can also look at it through this Google Doc. So we are just putting everything in it. So maybe I can start, when it comes to this work from home, for example, I mean, we have worked from home as a nonprofit, but now COVID-19 has kind of put pressure on everyone to work from home. And what we are noticing is that domestic violence is increasing. Women in patriarchal societies like India, for example, they work from home, for home, and at home, like 3 different jobs. The children who don't go to school, their education has fallen onto them. The elderly and the sick and the domestic and emotional care also is their burden. It was always so pre-COVID, but now it's exaggerated during COVID. And I'm part of several groups, even in highly liberated women's circles, their husbands just pretend like it's not their job, and they find a corner to sit and work whilst their wife, who may also be C-suite, has to shoulder all the burden. So it's causing a lot of conflict within home. But I feel that maybe if companies who force people to work from home, which is now the situation, they also start talking about sharing of the domestic care work.
Also, have you seen some good examples of companies doing that?
Yes, I was reading an article where this company, actually Pratima Kirloskar, who will be one of the facilitators tomorrow evening in investing in women-led businesses, her sister-in-law is another Kirloskar woman. So in her company, this is pre-COVID, she used to get the men into the room and talk to them about domestic care and said, If you want to be happy at work, you need to sort this out at home first. So, you know, and that way everybody has a great working relationship at home and at work. And I thought that was so revolutionary in the sense that was pre-COVID, when nobody was really talking so much about domestic care and its implications on women employees. And she got the men in her own organization to think more deeply about it. And I think we have to start those conversations somewhere, otherwise the numbers are not going to shift.
So what was the company called, Elsa?
It's Kirloskar Healthcare, and Kirloskar, they all have Kirloskar in their names, but I can find the exact company that she works with. But she runs a hospital, and she also runs some other companies.
Mm-hmm. Another example I just got to know about yesterday is actually the GIZ in Germany, which is kind of the development, like the USAID in the US. And I'm working with their Syrian team on different issues, and they have a care team which is cross portfolio, looking into just like how can we support each other as a team, staying home and being like, none of the team member actually works in Syria, so they're crossed all over like Turkey and Lebanon. So they're having this question for for the last 6 years already. So how can we as a team take care of each other, being always remote and never actually seeing each other? So they made it quite explicit and have a kind of a task force who deals with this. And in every location, there's someone who's responsible as the care team representative. I thought that was quite structured, quite nice. And one of the results of their work is, for example, like one in-person retreat a year that they got funding for internally.
Blair, I'm curious about how this shows up for you guys at the Accountability Lab.
Yeah, we have been thinking a lot about duty of care, as we call it, kind of broadly, which I think traditionally has been thought of more in relation to children, as it comes, you know, vis-a-vis NGOs. It's sort of duty of care to children, but we've been sort of much more broadly defining it and really trying to think about three elements for the places that we work. Three different elements of the duty of care. One is physical, of course, and it'd be interesting to, you know, to think about how that applies, Elsa, you know, to domestic violence and that kind of thing. I mean, and I'm talking sort of within our organization at the moment, which has grown quite a lot. And so we think of it more externally, like, you know, we work in some difficult parts of the world, but internal security, you know, domestic violence stuff, for example, I think would be really interesting to integrate into that too. Then there's digital security, and I'd be interested to know the extent to which that is coming up in some of these conversations too, and how it affects, you know, women differently in your experiences. And then mental, mental duty of care, I suppose. You know, really, and this gets to your point, Armin, about GIZ. You know, how do we make sure that people are getting the support that they need in all sorts of ways to deal with these issues and face the challenges that they have. And one thing we have done at the Accountability Lab recently is we have a 24/7 counselor now online for anyone in the organization that wants to use it. So we pay that person kind of on retainer, and if, you know, they are qualified and trained, and if anyone has any kind of issue that they want to talk about and need counseling around, then that person is available, which is good. But also, I'd be interested to hear kind of, I don't know which of the rest of us on the call have kids and are kind of dealing with this stuff, but I don't have any direct experience during lockdown of this. Like, how have you been able to manage all of this, and what are the challenges, you know, that from an employer you would want them to kind of deal with?
For sure. I mean, I think, you know, everyone I've chatted with about this was like the first, you know, 6 to 8 weeks, sort of mid-March through to April, employers were really good about, like, you know, work, if you could only do 2 hours on the computer a day, like, do what you need to do. It's like, it's super intense times. But I think as the pandemic has stretched out, there's kind of like, we've started to forget that people who are part of families, like, I generally have a hard time taking meetings before 9:30 because I got to get the kids fed and clothed and, you know, all of that stuff. And so I I turned down a full-time job that I would have had to start August 6th because I still don't have adequate childcare, and I could not figure out how I could work 40 hours a week and still stay sane. And so I made that decision partly because we just don't have the care infrastructure, and I didn't want to show up and not do the job the way I wanted to. But it's certainly, you know, some employers are really being fantastic about it and some are being really inflexible. And, you know, it's a real range and a mix. And for people who don't have to work in the home or who have to work outside of the home, I think there's a whole bunch of other risk factors and other pieces that come into play. While there are lots of us who can do the work from home thing, there's a huge part of the economy that's still retail workers, migrant workers, et cetera, domestic workers who are being exposed in different ways to COVID, or their exposure levels and the risk are higher. And so those are the other kinds of intersectional analysis pieces that we need to also think about. Like every time you order takeout food through Uber, like who's doing that delivery and what are the risk factors that are associated with this? And so, you know, I think I would love to see more governments take on a policy approach that centered care. I think it's actually really brilliant. And I think this is the time to do it. So exciting that Hawaii's adopted a feminist approach to their recovery. And we need to make sure that governments see, I don't think anyone can be blind to it now. If you forget about it, it means that you just haven't been paying attention. And I think women have really borne the brunt of this. And so we have a collective duty to kind of step up on this. And I'd love to see how we as the Alliance could kind of move on some of those angles and highlight when employers are doing well and when governments are getting this right. The fight that we're having now is about the safe return to school. We have a conservative government. They don't want to fund additional teachers. This particular government doesn't like teachers, doesn't like an education mandate, and we'd already been doing many strikes in the winter and fall, and so they don't want to reduce class sizes to 15. They don't want to pay for 200 additional teachers. They don't want to pay for more classrooms when everybody, all the health experts have said that's what we need. And so there's lots of learning and advocacy, and if we can do quick wins and sharing of like what's working in Sweden and what's working in other places, I think those kinds of rapid response things around centering care would be really powerful and something that I think would be really useful among the Gender Alliance community as we're all grappling with what that looks like. Yeah, that would be my wish for a way to kind of anchor this subject and this theme, because I think we each have a country perspective or a lived experience that would really inform this in a way that would be really useful.
You know, what has Hawaii been doing sort of differently in terms of its feminist response? Like, yeah.
So they actually adopted a policy response that said that they were going to feature caregiving as the core. So I don't know yet what it's going to mean, but it means that they're going to think about all of these dimensions and these features and what it means to have to do caregiving work like elder care and all of the wraparound pieces. So from a policy perspective, we're waiting to see, because I think this is really the first real kick at a policy intervention in this way. And of course, like New Zealand's doing some of these elements as well, but Hawaii very specifically has named it. I'll pull up the doc and throw it in the chat because I think it is really exciting.
Yeah, really cool. Elsa, has there been any discussion within this group of maybe partnering with maybe not a national level government, but a subnational government at the city level, or in this way, sort of trying to think through how we could support decision makers to drive this really into the center of what they're doing?
Not yet, but that could be a project. So Dima, maybe we should hear from you. And is that something you would like to do? And maybe there are people who might want to support you.
Yeah, actually, I was really thinking about our situation given the pandemic. Unfortunately, we don't have real mainstream gender mainstreaming policy on the government level, nor at our even at our ministry. So, a lot of challenges, multiple challenges, we're facing. Every working, let me say, a woman, and another layer of challenges for mothers as well, or the woman who takes care of her parents or elderly people. It was really difficult, and especially for people working in different time zone. That was also another. So basically, if I will say three main challenges. First one is how to take care of the kids, because sometimes some of them they couldn't. My colleagues, for example, or other Palestinian women, they couldn't join any of the events, unfortunately, and were obliged to take their leaves, or since there is no gender sensitive strategy, they were obliged to take all that let me say the challenges on their own personal responsibility. So some of them were not paid, some of them were obliged to leave the job, or they were dismissed from their jobs. A lot of difficulties, let me say, were faced by women, in addition to the difficulties of support tools, let me say, and infrastructure in Palestine. So we have internet, let me say, but sometimes we do have a lot of challenges in this issue. So if there is online, let me say, webinars or Zooms, sometimes it's really difficult to join from any place, for example, in any remote area, or sometimes you are obliged to join from the mobile, so you can't type easily, or work on Google Docs, let me say, or things like this from mobiles. So a lot of challenges, let me say, are faced by women in Palestine. I'm not sure if I can think about any specific project, but I really want to share also the what she mentioned about the support, let me say, system for kindergartens, or even for centers for let me say taking care of kids. How we can really create some alternatives in this pandemic, how we can really create new tools. This is also interesting for me to hear more about it from Chi and others. So yeah, I think I'm not sure if I have a lot to share in this regard.
Thanks, Dima. That was, I mean, it's super interesting to hear some of the local context for you and some of the issues. I mean, I feel like this whole piece about moving online is so hard for so many of us, right? Like I find it emotionally taxing to be online for big stretches, and the kind of bandwidth emotionally and intellectually that it takes to sit online for hours and as a way to work. It's like, it's not ideal. It's pretty great to be in community like this, especially in the early days when it felt like so weird to be in your house all the time. But like, I think we're all having to adjust to this, and it, you know, in some ways it just sucks. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, and the extra burden that parents are holding, and women in particular, makes it even harder. Because it doesn't feel like it's going to end anytime soon. And so all you can do is catch like little moments of joy and things that make it a little bit easier. But there is something super powerful about making or embedding care as an ethos and a value for institutions that are bureaucracies, right? Like they're instruments, they're tactical, but if we embed emotion into them, I think there's something really provocative about that. You know, and it ties back to the ambassador's remarks at the opening about her shift from being a micromanager, using a kind of toxic masculinity model of leadership, to one that's much more focused on nurturing and care, and how much happier as a human being that the ambassador is. Like, that was a really powerful kind of reflection. And so how we can create cohorts and people inside governments and inside organizations to do that and to be present in those ways, I think is really something that we can all be modeling effectively. And maybe that's one of the working groups, is like, what does an activated care look like in your organization, your universe, your ecosystem, your governments, and how do you push that out? So yeah, I'd be curious to see what we could do around that. Like, what are there some like quick wins, some like easy resources we could pull together that take some of the good insights that we have? Like, even just in this conversation, we've surfaced a bunch of really interesting examples, right?
Sulin, you want to speak, share something?
Yes, sorry for being on and off. I'm half in the office out here, but I've been listening in, and I think there are so many great ideas and so many resources here in this network, in this initiative. And I think, yeah, I have to say, like I see the Gender Alliance like it is indeed, I think, important to see what you can really do, what you can achieve in your reality. And to like work on a strategy, like what is really doable and what can we achieve, and what are the next steps we should do as a group. And yes, I'm really curious to see where it's moving forward. I think like if you like collect all these best practices, bring them together, and then point out how they are transferable to other organizations, realities. I think, yeah, that's going to be a great endeavor.
Armin, you're only taking notes. Do you want to add anything?
I think, again, it's the awareness piece. I think the conversation we have is something that we have being like, again, like me, not so much, but like you being very aware and in that topic of care. And I must say, yesterday I was on a call with the GIZ for the first time. I realized what the care team is, and it came up in my mind, because I really think it's about also raising awareness. Hey, there is a situation, you know, there is mental health issues when people stay at home. I'm in quarantine right now. I haven't left home for 8 days, which drives me crazy, literally. And it's getting harder and harder for me to focus, to be quite honest. So just the ideas that you mentioned, the very concrete small ones, like counselors and people, just like a hotline that you can call, they very much resonated with me when, you know, like, it's like, you know, where do you go when you feel just like really unfocused and really can't stay home anymore, but you have to, and you have no choice. So there's things, I mean, that come up now also in the pandemic, but also before, like, how do you, you know, take care of people's mental, physical health, and I don't know, like also the physical part. At the IAC, we have a sports program, which I think is really cool. We can have yoga sessions, or I think that's very important to say, hey, you know, holistically, even as a small nonprofit, there's something that we offer in the means that we have, because we know you're only good when mind and body is in a balance. And I think especially in the civil society, because we're so driven by impact, we don't talk about this so much. You know, like many of the startups I talk to, that's not their core issue. You know, their core issue is to survive or actually to create as much impact as they can, and then they burn out, and they're not ending as happy people in the end, and which is really, really sad to see. So I think the whole piece around, and that's where those campaigns I think are really good, just creating awareness that this is important, and whatever impact your organization is having, if you don't take care of the people inside, then, you know, it kind of degrades that impact. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like noodling around a kind of idea or a project that is about surfacing some of this stuff. It's crowdsourced examples. you know, whether it's in your own organization or that you've tried it. We also, you know, there are HR experts who have a focus on creating healthy work environments, et cetera. And, you know, it'd be interesting to have a conversation with them about how that thinking and those pieces of, you know, the infrastructure they're trying to create in their organizations lends itself to policymaking and to bureaucracies in which care may not be the fundamental driver of the work. And so it's like, could we focus on a kind of connecting, bridge building role that is about moving this idea of care on behalf of the Alliance into unusual places and spaces. And like, I think, you know, the banks and some of the big players here, like, would have put in place good employee supports, et cetera, in the times of COVID. What do we have to learn from that? And I actually think it would be a really interesting cross-sector conversation, because I think then we can then take it to government and say, we're actually modeling this in many ways, and have a lot of wisdom to share out.
And, you know, like, I'm reminded of like Jacinda Ardern, you know, the Facebook Live or something that she did in her pajamas. I think that was so inspiring to many people, because it made her like very connected and, you know, accessible in a way. Like, she's not this unreachable person. And I think those are the kind of things that hopefully we would want leadership also to, you know, model. Like, for example, Chi, how many, like, till you brought your baby to a conference, I don't think people even thought that a baby can be brought to a conference and won't disrupt the conference. Of course, yes, babies also cry, but that can be managed. You know, what does a mother do if there's no other choice? So does she always have to give up the opportunity? That way we are losing the best mind sometimes, you know, in the room.
Yeah, I still have this pilot idea that I would love to trial at the UN. Like, every time there's a policy decision to be made that has future forward-looking impact, there should be a baby on the floor in Parliament or at the UN, you know, seat in the Assembly, right? Like, it is a nice touchstone and a reminder about the generations that come forward, and the place for nurturing and care is actually about creating community and all of this good stuff. And like, you know, like, let's rent a baby out for all legislatures and all of these places. And I'm dying for a way to create that social enterprise, because I think it does make an impact. Like, I have a friend who was in negotiations on some environmental sanctions around climate preservation in the Clayoquot Sounds. They were trying to save these forests in the BC rainforest. And so the only way, like, the way they did the negotiations, because they knew they were sitting down with grandfathers, you know, these oil guys who were, and forestry guys who were interested in taking out the trees for forestry, for paper production, they just brought meeting babies. They brought a baby to the session because it calmed everybody down, and it then made it easier to negotiate on the really hard and messy stuff. So I think, you know, like, I would love to see that someone do that, you know, with more intention everywhere, you know. And we certainly have had a few members of Parliament in Canada more recently be on the floor of the House. The Democratic Renewal Minister, you know, had a baby fairly recently, and she brought her baby on the floor. But like, those are culture change pieces around care that I think are good small signals that I'd love to see us play with.
And we'll keep them honest.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think also language plays an important factor here. Like, as we're all coming from these different networks, we are surrounded with lots of awareness. But if you want to take this topic cross-sectoral to, like T mentioned, to areas where this is not so well promoted, I think one of the big challenges would be to develop this language, which and to find a way on how to communicate to these areas, sectors better, and to kind of point out this added value which comes out of it. What you wouldn't think of if you hear of a baby at a conference, but at the end, what comes out of it is of so much worth. So That's also important factor, I think.
Yeah, finding the right audience, the right language for the right audience around this stuff. If you're in a conservative, male-dominated society in a business where it's all men, telling them that they need to have babies in the room because it's about equal rights and care might not work. But if you say this will make you more productive, then it might resonate. Whatever we need to do.
Yeah.
So one of the companies in India, I mean, which we work with, I think it's Godrej. If it's a woman who has to go for a conference and she doesn't have childcare, in fact, she can take her child and the nanny to the conference, means on that work trip. So they are paid for. I thought that was pretty cool.
I was just going to share an example. The Body Shop, when it was still Canadian owned, in their headquarters, built a childcare knowing that their first employee was pregnant, but built it with for the capacity of 30 kids. And so people would just end up on their lunch breaks going to have a baby cuddle, and you would just go pop into the daycare and as a de-stressor, decompressor thing, if you needed a cuddle, go. And then the moms were just upstairs working, and it was a way to kind of make sure that the work environment was flexible for parents. And I always thought that was really great. I would love to have access to a baby all the time I can cuddle. Ilse, were there any other questions that we were supposed to tackle in the document?
So I think Armin has been putting it across the document. So the first was, how can we promote care as an organizational value? The second is, are there participants who can offer coaching, peer support for a project like this? What skills, support do members want to share or need? And how can their organizations contribute to foster professionalization of men and women in favor of gender equality and inclusion? And the third one is, what are the top favorite ideas that people would want to work on moving forward? So are there...
I also put the general ideas in there, not only ones working forward, but all the ideas.
So we filled in all three areas, but if you have any more thoughts.
Especially in the first one, because I more kind of summarized in the first one kind of where our discussion went. It's not kind of directly tools or anything.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we were doing our homework.
No, we are pretty much on track. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Do we have specific ideas that could be taken forward, or specific tools or skills that we can offer?
I think if we curate a care document that has whatever everybody does and kind of synthesize into one document, that would really help, because I'm doing a few things, right? But maybe there are others who are doing some other cool things that can be easily implemented in my organization, but I haven't thought of it. So I think that document might be the first step in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to start at. It feels like good low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we also insist, right? So for example, nowadays, most conferences have a sexual harassment policy. A lot of conferences, not a lot, but some conferences have, when you're pitching a session, you must make sure it's a gender diverse panel, So maybe we should also ask, at residential conferences, what is the childcare situation or something like that, so that people start thinking about it.
Yeah.
And start putting it in their budgets when they pitch for it, so that later it's not an issue.
Address what that childcare concept is. Cool.
Thank you. Before we get locked, thrown out.
Thanks, guys. This was a good conversation.
Thank you. This was really
Yeah,
great. Thank you.
Great conversation. Thank you.
So funny where we were in one group actually.
Random.
And I love hanging out with y'all guys. Thanks.
I know.
Nice meeting you, Dima. Bye. Thank you, Sulu.
Bye, Dima. Bye, Celine.
See you on the other side.
Hello, everyone. I hope each of you had a great time in your breakout sessions. What we're going to do now is a quick debrief from each breakout session. So please, in 1 or 2 minutes, one member of each group, please give your main conclusion. Who wants to start? Dalia, you were group number 1, yeah? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Trini. Well, we had a very productive session, I would say. We discussed the concept of care, and everybody had some problem to bring it down to a concrete action, I think, because we were all discussing, is care an activity, or should we talk about care as an activity or as a mindset? And I think that's very, very productive for the discussion. We realize that when we talk about care as a mindset, it's not gendered, it's not a binary thing, and it encompasses other communities. And we also talked about how by embracing the concept, we should expect maybe 2 outcomes. First, to change the composition at the table, when we talk about diplomacy, the composition of delegations, etc., but also a change on the sensitivity of the diplomat, of the persons that are participating in diplomacy, in diplomatic processes. We also talked about something that I thought it was very valuable from a professional diplomat's perspective, which is trying, when we talk about the inclusive diplomacy, it's valuable, but we have to go back to the roots, what diplomacy is. And we stressed out the importance of always keeping in mind that diplomacy is about representation and communication, and by representation about listening to others, and how care is very compatible with that. We also talked about how inclusiveness and representation is not necessarily the same, and how sometimes you have a very apparently diverse group, but if each participant contributes with the same set of ideas, and there is not the possibility of diversifying the value set, then it's not necessarily the outcome that we are desiring or aiming for.
Thank you, Dalia.
You're welcome. No, I just finally want to say that we had very concrete projects or ideas that could be adapted for diplomacy, and we put everything in the Google Doc. Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you. Caro, do you want to continue? Group number 3.
Yes, so thank you, Corina, Karin, and Banu that were my breakout room. So a couple of just like highlights. So the need for more safe spaces. Also the opportunity that we have as the discussions around diversity and inclusion are happening, not just in the US, but around the world, like how to keep gender at the center also when we talk about race, connecting those. And one beautiful thing also that Corina said, it's like finding people that make you strong, and the importance of our network. So I think kudos to that. So I'll pass it on to the next group.
That's a great concept. Thank you. Colette, group number 4. You're muted.
Sorry, the phone rang. I wanted to share the ideas of Cami and Patrick and Gabriella in our group. And first, we had a very fruitful discussion about care as an organizational value. And we emphasized the need to cultivate and nurture empathy, to understand from another person's perspective, to listen and to understand. And in terms of a concrete idea, Cami shared this idea of a digital care clinic that we might be able to implement together. And the idea would be to facilitate training and to develop and nurture our own alliance in the inclusive way that we are talking about, because to be inclusive is always becoming. We always become more inclusive. We are never totally inclusive. And I think this is, for me, philosophically, what I took away from this discussion, that it is always a process of developing. And that development process is concrete. As we have ideas and as we implement our ideas, we are always growing together in our inclusiveness as a community and as an alliance. And I think that what Gabriela also brought to the table was this idea of working with the extremely young, with children, with listening to them, with hearing their voices, with giving them the opportunity to share with us what they believe is important to them. And I think also to bring in this idea of care for our society, and as Ines also said, care for nature, and the idea that inclusiveness also extends to other species and sentient beings that sometimes we don't always include. So in this respect, the digital care clinic and the idea of being true, authentically true to our values in an inclusive way, with empathy, listening, facilitating, growing together, these are some of the main points. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Colette. We move to group number 5, Mohammed.
Hi, so yeah, we had a very wide-ranging discussion. I think our discussion first began about care in organizations, especially when it comes to gender equality. A lot of us spoke about how there might be existing policies when it comes to gender equality, but those policies are not necessarily implemented. I think someone already mentioned you see representation as an image, but in reality, you see a lot of tokenism happening. And a lot of that comes from the organizational culture. People are not buying into these policies. And so we started looking at and saying like, empathy and care, especially when it comes to gender equality, needs to begin at a very young age. And one project idea was using gamification as a tool to change gender norms, whether it's creating new games or incorporating issues of gender stereotypes and gender equality into existing games for children.
Thank you. Group 6, Cecilia. I don't see you. Oh,
yes,
yeah.
here I am, with a very bright scarf. So I had the pleasure to be with Nondumiso, with Ines. We were lucky to have the main speaker with us, with Jansu and Chris, and having Ines was helpful for us, so we could develop further our ideas about care and really go and dive deep. But there are 3 main ideas that we want to share with you. First is working on visibility, give visibility to people who care. And it was interesting to listen to Jansu talking especially about people who care, who are migrants or refugees, and thinking people who are really on the margin, recognize on the work they do. The second one is receiving training and coaching as organizations, groups, and communities, because there is much that has been advanced and there are lots of experiences from where we can learn. And so just listen to people, listen and learn from other experiences is something where we can develop and move forward. And Nondumiso was brought to our attention the Ubuntu word. And so we recognize the care philosophy as a philosophy that runs across several cultures in every single continent. So there is a need to decolonize and devalue violence that in this case can be masculine, but it can be also coming from a cultural violence as great. And by the way of recognizing Ubuntu specifically, we received the inspiration from Nondumiso about having these greater universal values of dignity and humanity across boards. We were just running short on how to move forward on specific experiences, but we were thinking highly on moving into green spaces and just recognizing and being grateful and aware small things happening around us. Maybe we need 15 extra minutes just to finish our ideas. But thank you. Thank you to all that participated and Chris who joined us as well.
Thank you, Cecilia and the group. So next group is number 7, Rocio.
Hello, everyone. Well, first of all, thank you to my partners in group number 7, Sandrine, Sylvia, Mome, and Edna. We were thinking right off the start with some project ideas. We were talking about maybe creating a woman boot camp to collect different ideas between policymakers and project managers, to ideate proposals, to share best and worst practices. So it would be from a very honest point of view, which is not that common, and the struggles that each and every one of us faced when we have created an idea or a project. Having care as the central value, you know. And some of us were talking about this woman boot camp would help us not to feel alone in the work that we carry in our organizations. And we also talk about maybe creating some kind of schools of a school of skill sets to include some of the so-called soft skills or feminine leadership skills, and to train, to offer training for marginalized and isolated groups, and link this type of school or workshops to already existing programs from big companies. And the resources we were able to identify were, Sandrine was talking about reverse coaching. Like if you have some experience, you could help others to improve the ideas or improve your projects. And actually, all of the members of the group had a lot of experience in the field and a vast network of partners, including funding and technical resources. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocio. And last, just please 1 minute because we're on time. Elsa, your group number 8.
Elda has asked to me quickly to report back. So first, we also talked about how can we promote care as an organizational value. In the session, there was Elsa, Sulin, Blair, Chi, and Dima. And we just looked at the context to start with. Corona obviously increased the time people spend at home. It also increased domestic violence. And there's kind of a triple work that women have to do at home, their professional work, as well as housekeeping, as well as work with children or mental work also with other people at home. And organizations, companies start asking the question, how can domestic work be shared? And the domestic care starts to be more of a topic. We had some examples there, and there's different levels of that care. So physical level, there's a digital security level, there's a mental level, which was an example that Blair actually gave. Then we had a lot of ideas what can be done actually. There's a 24-hour professional counseling, a psychologist on the call, buddy within the team, regular check-ins, exercise routines in the virtual space in Zoom, for example. And then we just talked about how those ideas should be really carried to network spaces, organizations that do not talk about it right now. And we obviously have to find the right language for the right people. And in the end, we just, we had a couple of cool examples that she was sharing, moments when babies crawled through the floor of the United Nations and other negotiation rooms, and how that actually changes the spirit of a negotiation. So also taking care of the younger of children can actually change the whole atmosphere in an office and at home. And as an outcome, something that we want to keep working on is kind of a shared document around care where we summarize ideas or collect ideas and approaches. And it's something else that we thought about, like actually when we look at conferences, major conferences in the world, what's their kind of care concept? So that's what we talked about in a nutshell.
Thank you, Armin. Thank you so much. Just to wrap it up in a second before handing over to Carolina, I worked with group 2 with Irina, Shripanna, and Felix, and I want just to pass on one idea which I find brilliant, which is If we want to create a culture of care within an organization, we should start by defining what we mean by care and what we expect to be treated when talking about treated with care. And one practical idea with that regard would be onboarding new people in that organization should include the definition of how we as an organization define care at that context in that moment. So that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the groups, and Carolina, please wrap it up.
So I want to give Dalia first a minute, and then I'll do the closing. Dalia.
Thank you, Caro. Well, thank you, everybody. This has been a very insightful session. Thank you, Ines, for bringing this concept that ends up being super, it's a revolution for many diplomats to link inclusiveness and diplomacy with the concept of care, and to everybody for all these different perspectives that are very, very insightful. I would like just to summarize. We talk about diplomacy as a tool, not only as a profession. This is not about professional diplomat. This is about every person that is engaged in a process of communication or negotiation and representation of a collective interest, and whether it's a nation, an organization, or a group of people that share the same interest. Diplomacy then becomes an activity or a habit or a skill to build bridges among nations or agendas or sectors and disciplines, like what we're doing or trying to do right now. It is necessarily, to be effective, it has to be inclusive and empathetic. So what I would like to say is that as a conclusion, a main conclusion of all these ideas, we can say that care, when we incorporate care and we can put a name on it, this as a value, as an organizational value for every diplomat, then as a mindset and a philosophy, it can be a game changer. And just very briefly, as a result of this session, it becomes more and more evident how powerful and transformative to have an alliance can be. So this is a responsibility for all the members of this alliance to keep on working on supporting each other in this battle and bringing in all the skills that you have and all the training to promote empathy, representation, inclusion, and of course, by bringing care to the discussions, you can always make a difference in your own organizations. Thank you very much, Caro.
Thank you, Dalia. That was beautifully said. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today, for staying engaged, for still being here even when we are 5 minutes past. I want to thank Bosch, the BMW Foundation, GDL, GLAC, and when we open, you share with us, and all of our speakers, of course, not our speakers, our keynote speaker, Dr. Kappert. When we open, you share with us your heroes, and I hope you've been able to identify other superheroes during today's discussion, and that you reach out to them. Quoting or misquoting Ai-jen Poo from the Caring Revolution here in the United States, we will need to establish our own care squads to support the work that needs to be done. So we look forward to continue this journey as we create our action plan for the next year. And if your group came up with project ideas, make sure to put them in the Padlet. I'm gonna put that again in the chat. I know Tanya has kindly and Elsa have put it. Please submit any ideas that came out from today before September 25th, when we will be hosting, or that week we'll be hosting a demo day with funders to pitch this process, these projects. Also to remind you, tomorrow we also have 2 exciting sessions, one on women, peace and security, another one on investing in women-led businesses. And Friday, we have engaging men in gender equality, and we will be closing with catalyzing our network. So we hope you are able to join us. Thank you again, and have a wonderful evening or a wonderful day wherever you are, and it was great seeing you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, host. It was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see everyone.
Please
everyone.
tell
Thank you very
everyone
much.
on the groups what you loved about the 2 sessions. Please encourage everyone to come, especially we need more men. So get everyone. We have space for 500, so we can really, have great discussions. So I landed up in a small session with a Palestinian diplomat. That's not going to happen in real life. So let's acknowledge that we have rockstar members in our network, and that we need to know, first of all, who's in our network to collaborate with. So let's spread the word. So please go on social media, talk about it, but more importantly on our own WhatsApp groups and on our Facebook groups, yeah, because this is a members only event, so we want more members. Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Qué gusto
verlas. Besitos.
Igualmente, Edna, un abrazote.
Gracias.
Gracias. Bye. I'm gonna save the chat. Okay.
Great job, Caro, Dalia, Trini.
Thank you. I think Trini dropped, but thank you so much. We'll get back to you with the document, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow again. Get some rest, Elsa.
I think the scare idea was fantastic. It worked out superb.
It is disruptive. It is super original. I loved it. There is one tiny problem maybe though, which is it's so new that people get a little bit in shock.
I think what we can do, and if you're open, around the UN General Assembly, let's put together a Gender Alliance working session on care. What do you think?
Yes.
It is great. It is great. But we have to warm up to make a better warming up beforehand, because people are surprised about it and they get confused a little bit with very valuable ideas and very valuable questions. Is care a nice care?
Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.
Ciao, Rocío. Gracias.
Ciao.
Gracias. Bye.
Put it on my list, and next week we'll connect on this, and let's float this as a panel, or not panel. Let's do a working group on care and build the concept out a little more.
I'm up to it. Thank you very much. I would love to.
Okay, great. Take care.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you.